Hi, everyone. Welcome to Get Well with Dr. Shel. I am Dr. Shalina Lalji, better known as Dr. Shel, and I know as a board-certified OBGYN and a functional medicine expert, your health is unique and deeply personal. It is a combination of genetics, lifestyle, and environment. Know this, no matter what your starting point is, you are never powerless over your health. Being on a health journey is a marathon, not a sprint. This podcast is about walking you through many different perspectives on health conditions, symptoms, and solutions that can help you get from fatigued to fabulous. My mission has always been to offer my patients and community the best of mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. You can learn more about me and my wellness center and schedule your telehealth appointment at drshell.com. We can support you no matter where you are in the world. This podcast is a powerful and simple way to carry the wisdom of thought leaders from around the world in your pocket and continue to develop your own healing journey every single day. So let the journey begin. Hello and welcome to another great interview today. We have a special treat for you. We have a wonderful, globally respected speaker, Lloyd Burrell. He's the leader and the author of the EMF Practice Guide and the founder of electricsense.com, as well as the creator of the EMFHealthSummit.com and the host of the wildly successful Healing with Vibration Summit. Lloyd is a globally respected leader on this topic, and he's hosted the world's longest running podcast on EMFs, featuring the most respected leaders on EMFs, 5G, Wi-Fi, and all things electromagnetic. And he is an expert in how to protect and remediate electromagnetic toxicity. He's profoundly dedicated leader supporting millions of people around the globe to navigate this ever more difficult topic, something that we're all surrounded by. And today we're going to talk about how EMFs, Wi-Fi, 5G, and even the wiring in your house or smart appliances could be affecting your thyroid and even your energy levels. So welcome, Lloyd. So good to have you here today.
Thank you, Dr. Shel. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So Lloyd, let's lay a foundation in case someone in our audience doesn't know this. What exactly are EMFs? Why are they important? And what sources of EMFs are surrounding us at all times?
Oh, that's a lot of questions in one you give me there. I'll try and answer them. So firstly, what are EMFs? Well, EMFs, when I say EMFs, what I mean is electromagnetic fields. Some people say EMR, electromagnetic radiation. Some people use other terms like radio frequency radiation. So it's rather confusing, lots of acronyms, but when I say EMF, I mean electromagnetic fields. And I actually mean, what I'm actually talking about is man-made electromagnetic fields, because although we don't realize it, we're surrounded by electromagnetic fields, natural and non-natural. That's part of all living organisms are dependent on this, the Schumann resonance, which emanates from the Earth, this magnetic field that the Earth has. Also, this life on Earth depends on all this. And in fact, life in itself, you know, the definition between life and death, is actually about a charge, a potential, cell membrane potential also. So really back down to fundamentally what we are at a cellular level, it's all about electrical charges and electromagnetic fields. So that's why it's important. And what I'm talking about is all these devices that have taken over our world, which are all, many of them rather wonderful, and there's lots of good reasons why we should have them, and notably the smartphone, the cell phone, which is just an amazing device. We can do so many things with that particular piece of technology, and all this wireless technology, really, the Wi-Fi, these, you know, so we can connect in our homes wirelessly, Bluetooth, all these, everything's smart. You know, there's so many devices now in our homes which are actually smart devices. And what all this actually means is radio frequency microwave radiation. So it's radiation, yes. And it's like microwave, you know, like microwave, well, yeah, like a microwave oven. And we know what a microwave oven does to our food. And so there's all these adverse biological effects that these exposures have on our bodies, and that's one concern. The biggest concern is really the links to disease, and there is a lot of science on this, which I know we're going to be talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the concern, is
Right.
that all this technology which is surrounding us, and
Yeah.
it's actually not even just the wireless, there's also wired.
Right.
You know, wired exposures. Yes, we can have electromagnetic fields. We do have in
Yeah.
most homes, all homes, I would say. I
Yeah.
can 99% guarantee this, that all homes have electric field, magnetic field, and dirty electricity exposures. And this is the problem. And there are links. We've got studies linking these exposures, wired and wireless, to many different diseases, including cancer.
Absolutely. And, you know this, and a lot of my community knows this. I was diagnosed with cancer myself in 2019. And when you say it's linked with diseases, 100%, right? I mean, we know what radiation does to our bodies, our mind, our emotions, and all of it in between. So when you look at tough diseases, in my own family, we've got a neurodegenerative disease, ALS, which I personally think is one of the most horrific diseases out there. It's been around for almost a century with no treatments, no cure. And it really robs your body of everything. And then, I myself was diagnosed with cancer. So I know in our family and in our home, even though I've been in functional medicine for, the last 15 years, 4 years ago, it was a light bulb. And I said, I have to remove every single area of toxicity from my husband's environment. And so Wi-Fi went away, and we did everything that we could to try to change this. And we'll come to that, because I think I do want our audience to take away some, great, easy to do tips that you always are so good at giving. So we'll come to that. But let's drill down a little bit for our audience that really want to know about the thyroid and how it connects with EMF toxicity. So how does EMF toxicity actually show up in someone's life? Because when I hear this and when I research it, I'm amazed at how similar many of the symptoms are to thyroid illnesses.
Yeah.
Fatigue, right? I mean, low energy, fatigue, weight, low metabolism, just overall just not feeling great. So let's talk about that.
Well, yeah. Well, so, I have to say the reason I'm talking about this is because of my own personal experience, what happened to me. So I didn't train for this. This is just something that really happened in my life, and my life took a different direction. It had to, because I was really in a bad way. I answered my cell phone one day and I became overnight sympathetic, what we call EHS, electrically hypersensitive, and I was reacting to everything. So the symptoms that I experienced, really, so when I talk about symptoms, I can talk about them from personal experience. And one of the things is headaches, day-long headaches, like similar to a hangover kind of headache. So it's that kind of woozy, kind of beating a drum sort of thing in your head kind of headache, which lasts really from morning until night. And then this fatigue, massive fatigue, which no matter how much you sleep, you can't seem to get rid of it. And then, so we've got these kind of immediate symptoms. And I was fortunate because people say to me, well, how did you know it was EMFs? How did you even know about that? Well, I didn't, of course. I knew nothing about this, and the doctors knew nothing either. So not that helped or made me feel any better, obviously.
Right.
But my doctor was very sympathetic, but he didn't actually understand this, know about it, and had received no training on this. But so this was all a discovery process for me, and there were these immediate symptoms, which was when I was using a cell phone, this pain that I had, and that's how I knew it was something to do with my cell phone. That's all I knew, and it just kind of went on from there. So there was these immediate symptoms, which most people don't get, but some people do, and it can be that. So it can be that what I call hot head, hot ear, And it can be also prickly, tingling skin, a lot of skin sensations, and also impacting sleep. As I say, that's a big one. This fatigue, this massive fatigue. It's not just tired. It's just, I was like walking around for a zombie, and this
Just
lasted,
exhaustion.
total exhaustion,
Yes.
total exhaustion.
Yeah.
So all these skin symptoms. And then weight loss, weight gain, kind of a yo-yo thing, unexplained aches and pains all over my body.
Wow.
Brain fog, that's another big one.
Big one.
So confusion, memory problems, and I experienced all this in some shape or form. Depression, I mean, I'm not a depressive type at all, and yet maybe it was the hopelessness of it, or kind of where I seem to be going, because it's as though I couldn't escape this. But there are studies linking, and we're going to talk about the science in a moment. But there are honestly so many symptoms. And when you just think of where, you're talking about the thyroid, when you use a cell phone, right? Where your thyroid is, okay, just below your Adam's
very
apple.
close.
And we've got a lot of science on this, which I'm going to share in a sec. But there is, it is concerning. There's lots of symptoms, and it's just whole body symptoms. And the thing is, again, I was lucky because cell phone next to the ear, pain, cell phone away, no pain. And that's why it's important to listen up here to what I'm saying, and not just for yourself, for your family members, because undoubtedly there are people, what science is telling us is that everybody is being impacted by these exposures. So some people can feel it, some people can't, but your cells can feel it.
Your cells can feel it. And down the road, your cells can then lead to autoimmune diseases, cancers, neurodegenerative diseases. I mean, the really tough things that show up later. So in a way, you're almost kind of fortunate if you feel it, because you'll do something about it sooner. So let's dive right into the science, because, to really kind of summarize, if you struggle with thyroid conditions, and I'm speaking to the community out there right now, it is imperative to remove EMFs from your surroundings and environment. And Lloyd is about to go into the entire science behind it, so that you can see, why it is so important and what kinds of studies we have with this. So Lloyd, yes, please share your slides. This would be great. I think this is great information. Thank you.
Okay. So it's a quick overview, because there's a lot of science on this, and we could talk for hours literally on this subject. But I think the starting point is really just to understand that there are some very clear mechanisms now which science has revealed, and there's many mechanisms, but there's two main ones as I see it. And the first one is the work done by Dr. Martin Paul on these voltage gated calcium channels, and the second one is how these EMF exposures penetrate the blood-brain barrier, this protective sheath around your brain, how it impacts that. So put very simply, what we're saying here is that EMFs impact you at a cellular level. So firstly, with regard to this first mechanism of harm, which I've just outlaid there. So the work of Dr. Martin Paul, what he found was, and kind of putting just lots of two and twos together kind of thing, and looking at all the literature, was that these wireless exposures, using a cell phone, being around Wi-Fi, standing next to a microwave oven, even when it's switched on, these kind of exposures cause your calcium channels in your cell to stay open. What he calls what is called the voltage gated calcium channels, and this then causes this creation of free radicals, a particular category of free radicals called carbonyl free radicals, and this in turn creates this peroxynitrite, which is a super baddie molecule, this reactive molecule, which is really proving to be one of the root causes of disease of this excessive oxidative damage that we're seeing with a lot of diseases, and is thought to be behind many chronic diseases.
Interesting.
So the mechanism of harm, what that leads to, this opening in the cells, so we've got cell membrane and this VGCC which stays open. This damages your DNA, cell membranes, your proteins, your stem cells. It disrupts cell division, mitosis, and also your mitochondria. Now, your mitochondria, those are the little energy factories in your cell which create this ATP, and there's somewhere, we don't know exactly, I don't think everybody's ever counted them, but something like between 10 quadrillion and 100 quadrillion, that's a lot of zeros, inside your body.
Yes.
Mitochondria, yeah, mitochondria inside your body. So we're actually more mitochondria than anything else.
Right. And we know now, like, I'm so glad you're talking about the mitochondria, because we know in science right now and in chronic diseases, we're really all trying to improve mitochondrial function now. We know we drill down to that level now in functional.
Exactly. Yeah. This is kind of cutting edge, I think, in some respects. So why is this relevant to this conversation? Because as you just said, but in terms of EMFs can damage your mitochondria in many, many ways by causing this mitochondrial dysfunction via this radical increase in oxidative stress, back to oxidative stress again, which is impairing this mitochondrial function of the eggs and sperm, thus impairing fertility, increasing calcium, that's the key, inside your mitochondria, which leads to this lowered ability to generate the ATP, the energy, and increased oxidative stress. So it's kind of a vicious circle. And so mitochondrial dysfunction is, as I say, at the core of many diseases. And so what's important to understand is these VGCCs are concentrated in three particular areas of the body. That's to say the nervous system, notably the brain, the sensory organisms, and the neurons, these cells that transmit info between the brain and the nervous system, and also the heart, and also the reproductive system, particularly the testes. And this, interestingly, corresponds to the areas where wireless has been found to cause significant damage. How strange as that? And then we have inflammation. We've got to talk about inflammation in this conversation. We'll be talking about EMF. So inflammation, this silent killer that slowly damages your body from the inside out. And this peroxynitrite, which is what happens downstream from these exposure from this VGCC transaction, is this peroxynitrite causes inflammation, and it's this which ultimately damages your tissues and can contribute to a long list of diseases, including cancer, which you were talking about. So EMFs are in fact a driver of inflammation at the cellular level. That's an important thing to understand. They're driving this inflammation at the cellular level. And so long-term, this peroxynitrite causes inflammation and ultimately damages your tissues and contributes to all these diseases. So what we're saying quite simply is that, these EMFs set off a whole load of biochemical reactions that are inflammatory, and that can affect virtually every system in your body. And that's what we're seeing, because you said to me, what are the symptoms? When you're looking at the symptoms, it's all over the body. It's all over the body.
Right. And we know, again, when we see patients, just to put it into clinical setting, we know that, in our field of functional medicine, we're constantly looking for sources of inflammatory reactions that are happening in the body. And we do believe that most chronic diseases do start with inflammation. That is the source of it. So the mitochondria is, what gets damaged, and inflammation, it's what's damaging all of the mitochondria in our body. So it could start in the gut, it goes to the brain. I mean, neuroinflammation is a huge thing now when we're seeing such a high increase in Alzheimer's, dementia, ALS, MS, Parkinson's, right? So
absolutely,
very, very important to put into perspective here.
Yes. And so the second mechanism I want to talk about, second mechanism of harm, is with regard to this blood-brain barrier. So most of the research on RFs, what we call radio frequency microwave radiation, in other words, what is commonly called wireless. So most of the research is on that. Your brain's about 75% water, something like that. It's very fragile. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows your skull is there to protect you from bangs and knocks, but not everybody knows about this BBB. Maybe that's the first time this blood-brain barrier. Maybe that's the first time you've heard about this today. But it so happens this blood-brain barrier is tremendously important, and it's keeping the toxins out, it's keeping the nutrients in. And we have research going back literally 50 years, which shows that cell phone radiation exposures can damage this blood-brain barrier. And not only can these exposures damage the blood-brain barrier, they can do it very, very quickly, in a very short period of time, as Dr. Ellen Frey's research has shown, that we see these abnormal changes, and we see the abnormal changes almost immediately. So it's not, it's almost immediate. And as I say, this is 50 years old research, and peer-reviewed research. And the studies which have been done subsequent to these initial studies all back this up. And there's over 20 peer-reviewed studies backing this up. So, it's very compelling research. And so we have a number of health problems, associated with this blood-brain barrier, or this leaky brain, as it's also called more colloquially. And these are things like depression, brain fog, these neurodegenerative diseases, which we've been talking about, and of course, chronic fatigue. So the question is there any evidence for EMFs? Just to jump to another topic, is there any evidence for EMFs dysregulating the immune system? And of course, this is ever more relevant today, with what's going on with the current climate, health, pandemic, or we don't want to go into that too much, but anyway, it's very, obviously the immune system, I think, is not being talked about enough. It's super important, perhaps the most important thing we should be talking about with regard to this pandemic. And well, we've got literally hundreds of studies on how these EMFs, these electromagnetic fields, this wireless and this wired, how these exposures dysregulate the immune system. Absolutely. And the studies are really upregulation, downregulation. Seems to be mainly upregulation, but the kind of effects they found are, the white blood cells are reduced, reduced antibodies, the lymphocyte T helper cells are impacted, and also with regard to the melatonin, which we're going to come to in a sec, but that's super important. We're going to elaborate on that in a second. But I want to talk about also the thyroid gland. So we mentioned that earlier. So, it's this little, you can see on the diagram here, this butterfly shaped gland in your neck, which is just below your Adam's apple here. And again, just think about how you're using a cell phone, and how most people are using a cell phone is actually how you should not be using a cell phone. I'll be coming to that in my tips and strategies bit. But when you're using it against your ear, then that's when you're exposing your thyroid to these very high levels of cell phone radiation. And then, of course, not surprisingly, we've got studies to corroborate this. And so I'll just run through you this very quickly. We've got an Israeli study that collected human thyroid cells from healthy patients and subjected them to cell phone radiation, found evidence of changes in the thyroid cells. And the study authors noted that the rise in thyroid cancer cases in Israel, this was an Israeli study, over a decade correlated with the rise in the use of cell phones. and I've put the links at the bottom for anybody. So I'm going through this very, very quickly, but anybody who wants to go back and check at this to verify that I'm not telling porkies, they can do that. So in 2016 study by the Hardell Research Group, is a research group based in Sweden, has performed some of the strongest research, because it's very specialized research on this, and they've been doing this for decades. They found that in a recent years, there has been a substantial increase in patients diagnosed with thyroid cancer in Sweden, as well as in other Nordic countries. And, that's where cell phones came from. That's where they were produced initially. And there was, it was rolled out sooner in Sweden, certainly than in the rest of Europe. I don't know how that compares with the US, but yeah, they had an early rollout of this technology. And they concluded that this increase coincides with the growing use of smartphones. And then we've got a 2019 Iranian study that reviewed 161 research papers. That's interesting. So it's not just one study, it's a study of studies, meta study. Yeah. And they looked at all these papers, and they found that cell phone radiation affects the thyroid gland follicles and the volume of cells in the gland. And then lastly, and there are more studies, there is more science than this, it's just a few that I've pulled out here. So we've got a thyroid cancer case control study from Yale University, which found that people who use their phone a lot had a particular and a fairly common genetic characteristic, that they had a 4-fold increase in thyroid cancer compared to those that didn't use their cell phone a lot. So that's,
very interesting. And I wonder, Lloyd, if there have been studies on autoimmune. You've mentioned the immune system, and we're talking about thyroid cancer. So many of our listeners also struggle from Hashimoto's thyroiditis, an autoimmune condition. I wonder if there have been some studies. I mean, you can theoretically imagine that it would increase the incidence of autoimmune thyroiditis as it does with autoimmune diseases in general. Have you seen any?
There are, and I know Professor Trevor Marshall has done some work on this. I interviewed him on my summit with autoimmune patients, and one thing that he found was that shielded caps, for instance, given to autoimmune patients to protect them from EMFs were particularly effective. So there is some research on this, and really, there's links to every single disease and disease really that you can imagine. Absolutely.
So I wanted to just make that point, and I also want to let the audience know that the links that Lloyd is mentioning, will have those in the notes, so you can definitely access those.
Yes, absolutely. So and then I just want to talk about your adrenals. EMFs also unfortunately impact your adrenal glands. So these glands that produce hormones that regulate your metabolism. Again, we're back to the metabolism and the mitochondria and energy, and that's why it's also important, how it's impacting, because we're full of mitochondria. As I said, we're more mitochondria than anything else, and science is saying quite clearly that EMFs stress, if you want, these adrenal glands. And there is one big study, which is pretty much the biggest study to date, which is the NTP study, US National Toxicology Program study, which is $30 million study. And they actually found occurrences of adrenal gland tumors that may have been related to RF exposures. That's what so with all these studies, there is so much controversy around this issue, and frankly so much money at stake, that when the science is being war gamed, and so even when the studies are coming out showing something really rather clearly, then afterwards the language is being presented to the public in such a way that it's totally confusing and played down. And so so that's with regard to these RF exposures. And then we've got other papers which are showing that this RF, this radio frequency microwave radiation, cell phone radiation, in other words, causes an increase in cortisol and noradrenaline, which is linked to impaired cognitive performance,
Yes.
blood sugar imbalances, and sleep disruption.
Absolutely. And of course, we know that the adrenal gland and the thyroid gland, so cortisol and thyroid hormones work so intricately together that if you have high cortisol and if your adrenals are not working well, your thyroid is not going to function well because you won't be able to convert your T4 to the active form of T3. Instead, you'll go to reverse T3. And so there is an intricate connection. So imagine EMF affecting the thyroid gland directly, the adrenal gland directly, and the mitochondria causing inflammation. We've got all these double, triple, quadruple whammies going on that is ultimately going to lead to chronic diseases and really tough symptoms that it's very difficult, much like your own story, to really live a quality life with when you have extreme fatigue and difficulty sleeping and, metabolic imbalances and depression and brain fog. All of those things just make life very difficult.
They do.
Yeah.
They
And
do.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that you're painting a very bleak picture.
Yeah.
But the good news is, that you can bounce back from that. And that's certainly been my story. And it's not that, from this thing called EHS. And it is very difficult to bounce back. And that's another reason why it's important to listen up, take on board this information, and be proactive with what I'm sharing here. But I'm just going to I'm nearly finished on the science, because I don't want to spend too long on it, but I just want to quickly go over, and I want to talk about the sex hormones, because I know that's an important part of what you do also. So yeah, EMFs impact your sex hormones, yes. But it's just, again, kind of bigger picture is that these EMFs dysregulate your endocrine system, the whole hormonal system. Obviously your adrenals are part of this system. And what's been observed is that EMF exposures initially produce an increase in hormone secretion, but over time, these neurosecretory cells become exhausted, leading to lowered secretion. So it kind of fires them up, excites them, and then they become literally exhausted, leading to lowered secretion, and in some cases cell death. And we've got multiple studies stretching back over 2 decades which show that EMF exposures at night impede melatonin production. So melatonin is this other hormone which some people call the master hormone, and we've got studies showing how it has a role in bolstering again your immune system, fighting cancer, anti-aging. It's a powerful antioxidant. It's perhaps the most important, who knows, perhaps according to certain experts anyway, the most important hormone we have. And it's, again, as you were saying, it's this balance, isn't it, that's going on. It's like when we knock the melatonin out, then that's like has a domino effect. And so this melatonin plays a vital role in, notably, preventing high levels of estrogen in the body. And reduced levels, quite simply, these reducing by exposing yourself to EMS, by notably sleeping in an environment which is high EMF, and we'll get into this, what I mean by that and how you can avoid this, but by sleeping in an environment which is high EMF, which I would say 95%, I'm being conservative, 95% of the Western world does, okay, this can lead to high levels of estrogen. So we've got this, again, this
estrogen dominance, the whole estrogen dominance issue.
Exactly. Which obviously is linked to higher breast cancer rates. Well, that's one of the things, and other things as well. And then we've got the other main sex hormone, as I see it, which is progesterone. And we've got studies that showing that exposure, again, to wireless suppresses progesterone production. And just one thing I want to say here with regard to women, and it's one of those things that really bother me. It's like the main thing that really bothers me is kids, when I see small children using the cell phone, and then kind of just below that, or a bit, anyway, quite a bit below that, is when I see women sticking cell phones in their bras. Given the science, given what we know, we've got literally, studies showing that women put their cell phone there and that they're getting a tumor there, exactly where the cell phone was. So that is a total no-no. And then we've had also, just very briefly, magnetic field exposure. So not the wireless. We've been mainly talking about wireless, but magnetic fields in your home. And again, many homes, a majority of homes, according to one study, have high magnetic field exposures. Just that alone can increase the risk of miscarriage threefold, which
Isn't
is
that amazing?
very,
So, to kind of summarize what you're saying here for the audience, the EMF impact really traverses all across the entire endocrine system. So we're talking about our human body has 50 or so hormones, hormones that we don't necessarily think of, but they exist. I mean, think about the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the adrenals, the thyroid, the sex hormones, the gonads, the melatonin, insulin. So all of those hormones, and we know EMFs impacting all of those hormones. And we know from a thyroid perspective, if you're really focused in on thyroid, all of these hormones, if you're estrogen dominant, it's going to affect your thyroid. If you're in adrenal fatigue, it's going to affect your thyroid. Your melatonin dysfunction will affect your thyroid. Your insulin disturbances will affect your thyroid. So, Lloyd, I want to kind of give our audience, some of the tips as far as
absolutely. So I'll just share very last slide, more studies, so people can see where to go to get more on that, and then I'll stop the share here so that people can go back to those URLs. So absolutely. So with regard to what we can do, so with regard to what we can do, so what I recommend is the and so the is actually an acronym for U for understand. So firstly, understanding what you're actually dealing with, what exposure you're dealing with. So I've actually, so far today, I've been talking about 4 different kinds of exposure. And that's the thing. First thing is you need to understand, well, which category does it fit into? Is it the wireless? Is it electric fields, the magnetic fields? Is it the dirty electricity? And when you begin to understand, then you can actually begin to do something about it. And the doing something about it is the M. So we've got the U for understand, and then the first M is to mitigate. And I beg your pardon, the first M is to measure. The third letter is mitigate. So the second letter is to measure. And how do we measure? Well, we can measure very simply by using EMF meters. And I've got one here, which is this tri-field meter. It's not, I'm not saying it's the best meter. It's just easy and it's fairly inexpensive. And really, you just turn the dial. It's point and shoot kind of thing. Really, it is. And you just go through these different settings there. I'm on the RF setting. You see it's very low. So I have, everything's wide here. I'm on this little laptop and it's all wide. So we've got the U for understand. We've got the M for measure with a meter like this, or other meters. There's a Cornet ED88T Plus, which is another meter. And I've got reviews on this on my website, which literally it takes you 5 minutes to watch the video and that's it, you're away. And when you can measure, then you can identify what these hotspots here are in your home. Otherwise, you're in the dark. So you measure, and you measure notably your bedroom, and we'll get to that, some specific tips with regard to the bedroom if we've got time, because it's important, the most important room to deal with. And thirdly, we're going to mitigate. That's the M. So we've got U for understand, M for measure, M for mitigate. And mitigate, there's 3 ways to mitigate. And the first is to turn the thing off, turn the darn thing off. If it's your cell phone we're talking about. So applying the protocol, understanding is, okay, cell phone, what's that? Oh yeah, it's a radio frequency microwave radiation. Oh yeah, I can measure it with this meter. Oh yeah, how can I mitigate? Oh, I can switch it off. And so with regard to specific cell phone tips, we can put it on cell plane mode, airplane mode, airplane mode, put it on airplane mode. When you're on airplane mode, then that will knock out this wireless, all wireless connectivity. And again, it's only when you've got a meter that you can understand that you can actually be sure that you've done that, because some of these phones, you've got to go into the settings and you think you've switched it off and you've not switched it off. So it's the cell phone it's like the most possibly the biggest source of EMFs for most people because of how they use it. And so the second thing I want to say is distance is your friend. And this is something, a nice little catchphrase we have in the EMF world, is you always want as much distance between the device. So imagine that's a cell phone. You'd never, ever, ever want it here. Never, ever, ever next to your thyroid, parotoid, next to your brain. You never want it right next to your head. You want it as far away as possible. So you don't need reading glasses to see it possibly. And distance is your friend, absolutely. Possibly using a speakerphone, possibly using an air tube headset, not a wired headset. That's not a good idea either, because that wire can act as an antenna, picking up all the ambient radiation and being.
What do you mean by an air tube headset?
So an air tube is like a regular wired headset, but it's got a bit of air tube, and it's got a bit of tube, hollow tube, which is full of air, which makes the connection, and so that breaks this antenna effect, which you would have otherwise. So those are some very quick tips with regard to cell phones. Only use it when you've got maximum bars, because otherwise it's working itself to death. Try and maintain contact with the cell tower. So you want maximum bars on it all the time, which means minimum radiation. Don't want to be using it in a car. Why? Because the car's like a Faraday cage. So it's a bit like being in a microwave oven, and that thing is a radiating device, which is radiating you and radiating all the other passengers.
Closed environment. It's a closed.
It's a sealed enclosure. Faraday cage, Michael Faraday, sealed enclosure. That's with regard to cell phones. And just to finish off on my little protocol, turn the thing off, increase the distance, and shield. And with a cell phone, for instance, how you would shield is, those we can buy these cases now, and we have some cases which just look pretty, and then we've got some cases which are actually shielded cases, and they protect you. They're usually protection on one side, and but again, you don't want to be using it next to your head, even with a shielded cage. So that's a really very quick overview.
Just real quick, there's all kinds of shields out there, and then there's those stickers. So talk to us about that. Do you believe in any of that? Is there any science to back that up? And then which shield or which case? And I know, there's plenty out there, but just for our audience,
sure.
Give an example.
So let me tell you, with regard to devices, things, harmonizers, chips, and neutralizers, and what you could perhaps stick on your cell phone. When I got sick, right, I did not want to know about EMFs. I just wanted to get better, get on with my life, just get rid of this thing. Just let me buy whatever I need to buy. Just let me buy that thing. And I just want it to all go away. And I bought everything that I could. This is nearly 20 years ago now. And there was nothing that I found at the time which alleviated these symptoms. Sometimes it alleviated it, but for a short period of time, but no long-term help. And so what I say to people is, do the measurable protection, because that's scientific, and in any case, you're doing yourself a favor. But what I would say is, so you do the and then once you've done the then you can introduce these devices, chips, and so on. And there are some out there which do have some science behind them, which usually the manufacturers have done. So there are some to very clearly steer clear of, and then there's some other which, for instance, the Harmony, which is a pendant which you can wear. There is some science behind that. The Waveguard device, which is another device you can buy, put in your home. There is some science behind that. The Wave Rider device, there is some science behind that. And I've actually explored this, and I've interviewed the founders, the CEOs of these companies. And there is some science, but honestly, my view.
You have to measure. You have to measure it.
You have to measure. And what I'm saying is, okay, so we have science showing certain benefits, but I know of no device which protects you from all this potential damage to your cells, which we've been talking about, you know, to the damage to the DNA, to your stem cells, to your mitochondria, you know, all these effects. I know no device out there that protects you totally from all this. So always we're going back to the that's the way to do it. So that's with regard to your first question. Then with regard to your second question, in terms of which cell phone shields I recommend, well, there's the Pong brand, Pong, and then there is the Cruz cases, Cruz, and then there was also Shield Your Body, SYB, I think it's shieldyourbody.com. Really everything they do I love, because they're very innovative and they're testing everything and create very some really groundbreaking solutions that they have. So those are three brands: Shield Your Body, Pong, and Cruz.
Wonderful, wonderful. So talk to us about laptops and, you know, wired things.
Well, yes. So we've got the cell phone. That's super important because everybody's got a cell phone. You know, I've been 19 years, Dr. Shel, no cell phone. And 2 weeks ago, I got a cell phone. Why? Because you can't get money out of your bank account, you know, without a cell phone. And we're getting to a step. I mean, I used to send a message to my wife, who sent me the code, through my wired connection. So we're in a world where, so the cell phone is super important, knowing how to use it. And my cell phone is switched off away in another room. And, you know, I'm not using it all the time. I'm just, it's an emergency device. Then with regards, so I'm on the computer all day. Well, how do I do? Because I'm still sensitive. I don't have the terrible symptoms that I had before, but I am still sensitive. In fact, probably I would say I'm more sensitive than ever. So how do I do? Well, everything is wired. And in fact, everything was always wired. You know, before all this happened to me, I was actually like, I was very clean living. I mean, I was already doing everything I thought that I should be doing, but I hadn't looked at this. And so this happened. And then so I never had the Wi-Fi, because it's 20 years ago. I never had the Wi-Fi, but and I don't want the Wi-Fi, and you don't want it either, believe me. And if you can remove that Wi-Fi, that is my #1 recommendation. And how do you remove the Wi-Fi? Well, you introduce a wired connection, and I've just got one end. You can see that is an Ethernet connector. Actually, that is something you can use on your phone. You can actually connect your phone with this. That's what it's designed for. But that's what an Ethernet connection looks like. It's the plug which goes in there. You know, a lot of people, they don't even know what these are anymore.
Like this.
Yeah, that's
that
it.
I'm connected to right now.
Yeah, exactly. So you know what an Ethernet connection is, but there are many people who, you know, young people who they've always connected wirelessly. They've got a laptop. Why do I need wires? You know, wires, they are a pain in the backside, but they do look ugly, but they are safe.
Yes.
Way safer than these wireless exposures. And again, just think back to the science that I've just gone through very, very quickly, what all that's doing to you, these wired exposures. And it's this like chipping away. It's not like boom. I was lucky because it was kind of boom. It was overnight, literally one day to the next. But most people, it's not like that. It's like there's a diminution in quality of life, lots of things, the brain fog, the not being able to sleep, all these mystery symptoms that come along. You've no idea what it is. And I'm not saying it's all EMFs, but it's EMFs with all the other stuff, with all the other toxins. And the difference with EMFs is it's this non-localized exposure. So, you know, if you smoke, you know you're smoking, you know, kind of, okay, it's not such a good thing. But a lot of people are using a cell phone and they've no idea just what bad news it is for their health. And so it's this, you know, so you can stop smoking, you can eat healthy food, you can do all these things which are beneficial to your health. But if you don't look at this EMF question, then you're overlooking something major, because we're back to this non-localized nature of these exposures. It's everywhere. So even when you get rid of the Wi-Fi, your body's still dealing with these exposures from other sources, from cell towers, etc., from the wiring, from everything. So it's like, you know, it's all, there's so much here. It's a big topic, as you're beginning to see. And so we're just like giving some things for people to do to start with, some like baby steps, just get started. Okay, wire the laptop.
The overall exposure. We have to reduce the overall exposure.
We have to reduce the overall exposure. And again, because of this synergistic effect, and this is what the studies are saying, it's this EMFs plus the other toxins,
Yeah.
plus the heavy metals, plus maybe that virus, plus the parasites,
Yes.
plus, you know, all these toxins which are
Right.
exposed to the soaps and
Right.
creams and all the rest of it that we put on our
Yeah.
skins. And it's all
Yeah.
that. And that
It's
is what's
all
causing this
cumulative effect.
society, chronic disease, which many of
Absolutely.
us are experiencing.
Absolutely. I think this has been so enlightening, Lloyd, because, you know, we went through the science. You did a fantastic job of that. And I think just having these takeaways of what you can do. And I want to kind of, you know, really reemphasize to the audience that, you know, a lot of us know about, you know, we need to look at heavy metals. We need to look at mycotoxins. We need to look at bacteria and viruses. We need to look at hormonal imbalances. We need to look at nutrition, gut microbiome. EMF is equally, if not more important, because it's a constant toxic exposure. And what Lloyd is mentioning here is absolutely crucial. And I know that, Lloyd, you have a lot of information on your website and all the blogs and podcasts that you've done. So if our audience wants to dive deeper into this topic, can you let us know how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. So
to
go to electricsense.com. So it's all one word, electric sense as in common sense, electricsense.com. And then there's just a wealth of information. Frankly, it's my life's work. Started in 2009. There's thousands of comments. I mean, just the comments reading through, it's mind blowing. People sharing the stories. There's a free report, which is kind of introduction. And then there's these bi-weekly podcasts where I speak to building biologists, researchers, scientists, medical doctors, to really explore every angle of this. And frankly, I'm still learning today about this. And yes, so it's a big subject and super important, given, you know, 5G and the world we're moving into now.
Yes.
Then really, you know, people need to take this on board and take action.
Well, I'm so happy that you were able to give us this time today to educate our audience on the importance of protecting themselves against EMF and all of the damages that it can potentially have. And I think I just want to, you know, a takeaway message. You would not want to put yourself into a microwave oven. So we are living in an environment that is becoming more and more of a radiation environment. So please do go and listen to some of Lloyd's other information. Lloyd, thank you again for joining us today. It's been a total pleasure, and really, thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, genuine pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for making time for today's podcast with Get Well with Dr. Shel. I know that this conversation and education can help you to create your best life possible on every level. So definitely tune in to hear the newest expert and learn the latest protocols to support your best health journey. You can learn more about me and my wellness center at drshel.com, drshel.com, and I hope that you will make time to come visit us in the Houston area to take a deep dive on self-care. My team and I are completely devoted to helping you live a better life from this moment forward. The best days of your life are ahead of you, I promise. This podcast is a powerful and simple way to carry the wisdom of thought leaders from around the world in your pocket and continue to develop your own healing journey every single day. So let the journey begin.